Australia are throwing the Ashes away, or at least it feels like it. Pat Cummins may have said last week 2-1, no momentum change. But just like his views on the planet, things are changing and it's not for the good. With the constant threat of rain and Australia's ability to collapse at any given moment, they put out a side that would be able to bat big, but more importantly, be able to bat long. And over the course of the first day, they managed to do the complete opposite. Starts without converting it into a big score and losing wickets at regular intervals. England then showed Australia how to bat on a good wicket by having their opener with the worst opening record in Test cricket absolutely bash Australian bowlers around for a run of ball 189. And then up the other end, they had their retired frontline spinner who hasn't scored a 50 in 4 years, bumped up to 3 and was happily slapping the Australian bowlers around. And then just to make things worse, Joe Root just played like Joe Root. Now England are 67 runs ahead, they have another 6 wickets in the bank, and Australia are probably the most rattled I've ever seen them in my life. And England may very well be favourites in this series again, if we can't successfully rain dance and wash out Old Trafford. So far, everything Australia have done in this game has been a complete disaster. But with the magic of hindsight and common sense, the problems first started with the team sheet. Australia were really brave to drop a spinner, especially given how important spinner's been at Old Trafford in previous years. And after watching our fast bowlers go at 6 and over, followed by the part-time spinner coming on and going for 10 and over, it's pretty easy to say it was a massive mistake not playing a spinner. But I think although it was one of the worst displays of bowling and fielding that I've ever seen, we also need to look at the team sheet and wonder why we couldn't produce a decent score in the first innings. Australia obviously knew they underused Murphy in the last test and potentially thought in this test with the amount of expected rain to come, he again would be underused. So they preferred the batting depth and the extra rotation bowler with Mitch Marsh and bringing Cameron Green back into the side. And one of the funniest parts about this is the general reaction from the public before the game had started was a good one. Most Aussies thought we were going to bat long and we would take a draw at the very minimum, and we would retain the Ashes. So had the batting not let us down so much, I wonder if there actually would have been so much speculation around not playing Murphy. And we also can't forget England actually also took a massive risk by playing the extra bowler and moving Ali up the order. And based off his previous record, that was a risky move, especially when they haven't been particularly good with the bat either. And then to make matters worse, Australia then lost the toss for probably about the 500th time in a row, which is getting beyond ridiculous now. Pat Cummins would have to be the last bloke in the world that you would want to spend Anzac Day with, because he is absolutely honking when it comes to flicking coins. He doesn't win tosses. How can you... It's looking like we might go a whole series without a single toss win. That's got to be the first in history. And this was just the start, and it just all went south from here. So I'm actually struggling to find a word that can fit the description of Australia's batting. But there isn't really a word to describe just how bad that was. Australia have looked pretty weak all series with the bat, and this game was no exception, because despite being sent in, it was a good batting wicket. Yes, there were clouds around the pitch, but the pitch itself was good to bat on, especially if they survived that opening onslaught with the clouds, because the sun came out and it was beautiful to play. But the Aussies threw it all away, and it's especially frustrating knowing that we picked a team that can bat deep, yet they could barely bat out a day. And also the fact that so many batsmen got starts, and if just 1 or 2 of them had converted their 40s into 100s, this series would be finished. We wouldn't be having this conversation. To have 3 batters, to have batsmen number 3 to 6 all score between 41 and 51 and not go on to produce a single big score is criminal. And it does feel wrong to lay blame on players that are scoring 40 and 50 because it's a decent score. It's when our most important batsmen need to step up. Warner, Smith, Marnus, and Head are all senior players in the team, but it seems like they all lost their heads and they all got out trying to force shots that were not there. And Marnus probably takes the cake at the moment. He's always getting a 40 or 50 and just playing a stupid shot and getting out, and this was no different. That ball from Ali he should not have been trying to flick that round the corner, and at such an important time of the game, It's silly to lose the wicket there. I feel terrible for laying blame on players scoring 50s, but at least someone in that team needs to go on and convert that. Another big problem is the obvious one. At the top of the order with David Warner and the lack of confidence in our number 6, Cameron Green. Warner's nightmare run just keeps continuing, and they're now stuck in this terrible spot where you don't want to bring in a new player like Harris, who hasn't really had that much success at Test level previously. You don't want to bring him into this pressure cooker where England are probably going to go 2-all in the series and have all the momentum, because it could just end up in a very, very worse situation. But at the same time, David Warner is not firing, and he really never has in England. And it's a similar case with Cameron Green. I think we're all aware that his potential is limitless, but his batting at the moment isn't exactly where you want it to be. It seems like CA have invested in Cameron Green, and they want to give him the experience so that in the long run, he's going to develop much quicker. He has lots of playing time at the Test level, and he's going to be a great player. But we then have to understand and expect that he's not going to be turning up every second innings. He's a 24 or whatever year old all-rounder. Again, all-rounder. Most all-rounders only average in the 30s anyway. Still very young, still very inexperienced, playing against a good England side at their home. So overall, it's extremely frustrating, and a lot of people are calling for players' heads. A lot of people want to swap this team around completely, but I think chop and changing the team doesn't seem to be the answer. It seems more so on the maturity and the understanding of the situation when batting, especially from those senior players. The importance of building partnerships and not losing wickets at key moments of the game cannot be understated. And Australia just seem to slip away whenever they were starting to get control, whenever they were building these 50, 60, 70 run partnerships and taking the game away from England, they would lose a wicket. And if there was one analogy that I could use for this innings, it would have to be the high school report card, because I know everyone's received one of these in their times. And it's the classic one with the teacher's quote at the top saying, "Oh, Marnus has lots of potential and he could be top of his class, but lack of discipline and lack of focus is what's letting him down." On the flip side of the coin, I thought England bowled really well. Woakes is an absolute monster in England. His purple patch just seems like it's going to continue, and he took his first Ashes fifer. But overall, I think the most important part is they bowled really well as a group. They stuck to a plan, they tightened up the runs, and they made Australia force their shots and made Australia really play for their runs. And the Australians completely fell for that and played right into England's plans. The English bowlers kept their cool, they didn't mind getting hit for the odd boundary, and they backed their bowlers to get the job done over time with an offside field, which is pretty much a stark contrast from where they were a couple of games ago. It almost seems like the roles were completely reversed. But it seems like Woakes and Wood were the missing pieces to this puzzle, as Woakes is just happy to tie a batsman down. He's happy to toil away, just go for a couple of runs and over. And then Wood comes in with that X factor, that raw pace, and doesn't allow batsmen to feel settled. It just seems that individually, the English bowlers don't seem to be unstoppable. They're not absolute world beaters, but they bowled really well as a collective. And you know who didn't bowl really well as a collective? Australia. Today it was genuinely probably the worst bowling along with the worst fielding I have ever seen from an Australian team. Everything they did throughout the day seemed like a pure reaction to the situation rather than being proactive and thinking about their plans and backing themselves to execute those plans. Instead, they completely lost their cool, and as much as I hate to say it, they got Bazballed. When we talk about the Bazball era and why it can be a successful method in Test cricket, we will look to this day. Completely rattled the Australian bowlers, and Cummins as a captain who looked like he had absolutely no answer at all to the batters. If I'm being generous, Australia probably bowled well for the first 20 minutes, but as soon as England started to hit runs, the bowlers started trying way too many different balls, such as bowling on the leg side, then following it with a wide one outside off, and then a bouncer down leg, and it just gifted England runs. No bowlers bowled to their field, and when they started getting smashed, Cummins just tried to plug the gap that they hit it to And then the next ball, they'll just hit it to where he moved the fielder away from. It was an absolute shambles. They actually had Crawley in lots of trouble early on, but instead of just bowling outside off, which we know he has a weakness to, and stacking the offside, they instead put men out on the boundary, allowed him to rotate the strike, and then kept bowling on his pads. Obviously, from the outside in, it's really easy to say, but it would have been interesting if they just played a traditional offside field, back themselves to take wickets over the time, don't let him rotate straight, and if they want to attack and play Bazball, let him attack the good balls outside off and just see how they go. England did the exact same thing to us, and it paid off. And I'm not sure why the Aussies haven't tried it a single time. The whole series have always had men out on the boundary. I would just be interested to see if they brought the field up, would it actually be that much worse in how it's going? Because I think it could create pressure, and at this point, we've got to try something new. And to make it worse, they had a really, really poor day in the field. Whether it was a bowlers overstepping what it seemed like every 3 balls, or the constant misfields, or even the drop catches, it was just appalling in every single aspect, and England took full advantage. And as much as I want to go on slamming the Australian bowling and the fielding, yada, 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 we need to give full credit to England because they created this chaos that Australia just can't deal with. They stuck to their method of trying to play aggressive and disrupt the bowlers' rhythm, and it worked great. Crawley was played one of the all-time innings, smacking cover drives and stepping across wickets, flicking it down the fine leg. He attacked Head from the get-go and didn't let him get into the game. He smashed him for 6. So credit to Crawley, as he came into the game with pretty poor form, but didn't let it bother him at all. He stuck to his game, he backed himself to play aggressive, and luckily for him, it didn't take long to rattle the Aussies. And once he was set, once he was in, there was no stopping him. He looked unreal. Moeen Ali also picked up his first 50 in years, and he looked really good doing so. I saw that he actually asked Brendan McCullum if he could bat up the order. He was the one to put it to the coach and say, I want to bat 3. And it's paid off massively. Again, much like all the batters, he played with freedom, he played with fear, with no fear of getting out, and just happily attacked the Aussie bowlers and set up the foundation for the innings. He saw off the new ball and he set it up for the freak that is Joe Root. And Joe Root, what can you even say about Joe Root? He was always going to be up for a big innings, and today was no different. 200 partnership with Crawley, smashing cover drives, flicking over the slips for 6. He even sent his first ball for 4. He looked so comfortable throughout the entire innings that if it wasn't for a ball that rolled and hit his stumps, he would probably still be out there on 150. He is just that good of a player. He looks in complete control every time he bats, which is why the Aussies can't let him come in at 2 for 130 and also give him singles and loose balls to get his eye in, because he is just so good, up there, easily top 3 batsman in the world, and again, dominated the Aussies. So Australia are now left in essentially an unwinnable position, and I'm expecting all 11 players to get out on that pitch early and start rain dancing to the gods, because if we don't get rain, it's looking very like we could lose this test, and not only just lose it, but lose it by an innings. And that's probably not the best momentum, as Pat Cummins likes to say, to take into the final game. Anyway, I'll be back here in a couple of days, most likely crying out some more tears. I'll see you then.